Several years back, I made a video about the many ways one could develop a motif. And while all of those tips still hold true, there are many more facets in the construction of music that are outside the disciplines of harmony, counterpoint, form, or thematic development. In the realm of form, there is perhaps a hierarchy of knowledge one ought to have, and I would contend good form is not just how to lay out a piece, but also how to structure the smaller aspects within a piece. In this video, I'd like to discuss something that I might say belongs to those smaller aspects of form, and not the macroscopic world of structural or dance forms. And this is the ground motif. While the ground motif is closely related to techniques that govern variation and all that entails, and even the basso ostinato, it does nonetheless occupy a slightly different place in the realm of thematic development. So what is it? The ground motif is a short melodic figure, typically about one measure in length, though sometimes a bit more or less. It's usually placed in the bass part, and it's repeated there as many times as needed. These repetitions are often exact, but can be slightly altered. Occasionally, the motif may even be transferred to a different part altogether. But what sets the ground motif apart from the type of motif used in, say, the inventions or preludes of Bach is that, unlike motifs which are tossed around between different voices and parts, the ground motif tends to stay rooted in a single voice, most often the bass. Hence the name, not just ground as in bassline, but ground as in foundational or structural. A fantastic example of a ground motif is found in the finale of Brahms' First Symphony. Now, to be clear, a passage based on a ground motif isn't exactly a variation form in the formal sense, but technically the similarities are strong enough to think of it as kind of a proto-version of the same compositional process. It's much more likely to show up as a section within a larger piece rather than a basis for an entire composition. At each recurrence of the ground motif, the other part, meaning those not containing the motif, change around it. This might mean new melodic material, new harmony, or new rhythmic variations, or even contrapuntal combinations. In this way, the ground motif becomes a kind of backdrop against which continuous variation unfolds. Because of this relationship to variation, it's customary and often musically wise not to completely change the harmonization with each new statement of it. Instead, composers typically maintain the identical or nearly identical harmonic structure for at least two statements in a row. This helps the listener orient themselves within the structure. Later in a piece, earlier harmonic or melodic groupings established in the initial ground motif phrase may be recalled and confirmed, creating longer formal ideas. These kinds of structural confirmations are essential for shaping an intelligible and musically satisfying work. Now, for the purpose of musical variety and effectiveness, one can identify three common liberties when working with ground motifs. These should be employed only after the motif has already been clearly established, when there's a need to avoid monotony. They are as follows. First, unessential melodic or rhythmic alterations to the motif itself. These could include embellishments like passing or neighbor tones, slight rhythmic displacements, rests, dotted notes, or even chromatic inflections. Second, transferring the ground motif to another voice. This is usually done only after it has appeared multiple times in its original position, most often in the bass. And third, sequencing it instead of an exact repetition, that is, restating the motif at a different pitch level, on another scale degrees, or in different keys. With these liberties in mind, I would like to now, in succession, present a few examples of the ground motif in action. Relatives of the ground motif can sometimes be seen in pieces where another voice, be it the tenor or perhaps alto voice, repeat a repetitive motif. But the effect remains the same as the ground motif, even if it isn't the lowest voice. With any application of the ground motif, it's crucial to think structurally from the beginning. Even with something as compact as a ground motif, the composer must adopt a definite plan for the entire phrase or passage. Otherwise, you risk assembling a jumble of interesting fragments without cohesion. Finally, it should be noted that the ground motif should be viewed as a structural concept, and not a melodic one, as simply a repeating melody and a bass voice, over which no structural variation of thematic and harmonic material is built, does not constitute the ground motif. In my next video, I will be discussing the related basso ostinato, which, although similar, is somewhat different to the ground motif, so stay tuned. If you enjoyed this video and are also looking for a course to improve your understanding of theory and harmony from the ground up, consider becoming a channel member for exclusive content and lessons.